part. Next part is again the way it was yesterday. 5 of you who sort of applied and said we are interested in community action, submitted some kind of write-ups of what you could share over here. And so 5 of you we are inviting here in a talk show. So it's going to be a talk show, it's not presentations. My apologies if we miscommunicated to you that there would be presentations. There are no presentations. I'm going to ask you certain questions and I'm going to seek your responses to those. You have to tell your stories. That's what we want. We want your stories coming out and illustrating some of these principles.
Actually, we believe that the social accountability equal to power relation, and we try to understand, we try to modify, or we try to intervene in the power structure of public health system, between public health system and the community. That is basic goal or aim. So in that context, actually we believe that who are the, because government has their monitoring systems. There are 2 monitoring systems in Maharashtra and India. There is external and internal monitoring system. External monitoring system, someone from Delhi will come to the state and monitor what is going on in the health indicators and they evaluate the system. And internal monitoring system, the MIS, monthly review meetings and data which is created by at local level that has been reviewed at the state level. So we believe that the community or the beneficiaries and the marginalized groups are the key and one of the major stakeholders who can monitor the public health system. And that with that thread, we have developed a mechanism called community-based monitoring and planning of services, where we have constituted the civil, we have engaged the civil society organization at various levels, and fortunately, unfortunately, it is we have critical collaboration with the state government. So it is a state government initiative, and we have created a multi-stakeholder bodies at each level, and they are doing the monitoring of health services at each level.
For the case of Uganda, we normally use what we call a community-based monitoring and evaluation systems, popularly known as CBMES. This is a community-driven approach. And of course, why we chose this, first of all, the aim of this approach was to make everyone in the country a monitor. Okay, though we are still not yet there, because we believe it's very cheap. If you use local communities to monitor service delivery, you don't need to spend a lot. And how does this approach work? First of all, we start with preliminary visits. If you want to introduce this in a community, we have to come and meet the community leaders first and tell them about our intention. What do we want to do in a community? Some of them actually have invited us to come to them because they think there is no accountability in the different regions. Then afterwards, we hold community meetings where we do the selection. Because we want to ensure that people actually are volunteers. We tell them a criteria. We want someone who is able to read and write. It can be in a local language. It doesn't have to be English. Then also issues of gender. Then someone of integrity. Then in that community meeting, that's where we select the different monitors. Then afterwards, we go into a training, people that we've selected. We train them on what are their rights, different government programs, and other relevant issues they're going to monitor. Then immediately after the training, we take them through an exercise of monitoring because they want it to be practical. We go to the field, interview people. We do monitoring of a health center, for instance. We interview the different in charges. Then afterwards, within a week, we compile a report and organize a community dialogue right from the lowest levels. And we invite whoever is actually part of that, both community members and service providers. Then after, we actually from a sub-county, the lowest levels, we go to a district. Whatever issues cannot be held at the district are taken up at national level. That's how the approach works.
In Uganda, that's World Vision, we use an approach called the Citizens' Voice and Action. It's a community-led social accountability methodology where community members are brought together and sensitized about their rights. So the process starts with bringing together community members. Particularly, we try to focus at all categories of people across the community, with more focus on the marginalized communities. But then when we bring these people together, we try as much as possible to identify the retired civil servants, because they tend to have more understanding of the policies. Now, when these people are brought together, they help communities translate the set policies into a simpler and palatable way that they can easily relate and interact with these policies. Now, we're looking at policies ranging from health, education, livelihood, and all that. So, particularly in health, they will try to unpack these policies because most times they're a little complex for the community to comprehend, and it becomes hard for the community to engage government. So after they've understood the policies and converted them into simpler pieces that they can easily comprehend, then the communities are further sensitized and made ready to appreciate and understand the policies they have. Then hereafter, they go on to visit the service delivery points, where now they're able to compare what is laid out in the policies vis-a-vis what is being delivered. Now, when they look at this, then it is at this point that they're able to identify the service gaps. And then as a community, they're able to go through what we call a root cause analysis that speaks to them coming up with what we look at as a scorecard. So they determine a score based on how they see the quality of services they're receiving are within that facility. And then after they've gone into that, they will now reach a point at which they are going to engage with the duty bearers and then go ahead to score the quality of the services that are being offered in line with what they feel serves them, but also in line with what the policies say in the presence of leadership. So it is at this point that then the duty bearers are put a task to be able to explain as to why they're not delivering to the promise, but also the two parties get to interact and then move on with what we call the action plan. So the two parties begin working together, particularly with the government meeting its commitment, but also communities keeping them a task to be able to deliver what they're meant to deliver.
In the case of Guatemala, to just put everything that I'm going to say into context, we work with communities that are also users of the public health services. And this is what's so important about our approach, because the demands for accountability come directly from the users. It is them who want the accountability to take place. For us, what's fundamental is to empower them through the law, because once they know what their right is, it's easier for them to engage. Based on this legal empowerment, that they go to health facilities and then they survey or oversee what's occurring, and then they document this. And the real importance of this is that the users are the ones that are doing the accountability. And what is the outcome of this accountability process? That users themselves identify what the needs are, and then, ¿y qué dijiste después? Identificar las necesidades, ¿sí?
Y en los servicios de salud.
The importance is that communities are able to know about legal empowerment, about the right to participation, about the right to health, and about the right to, ¿cuál dijiste para el último?
Era participación, ¿no?
Yes, social participation. I'll start taking notes. Some of the mechanisms that we have used are community assemblies and monthly meetings, but also quarterly meetings, either inside the communities or with authorities, and at the national level with congressmen or congresspeople. The goal of this is that the information reaches the public, and that it is through this way that pressure can be exerted on the health authorities. We find that by making these things public, changes begin to occur because there's pressure exerted on the health services.
Okay, thanks. In the Seychelles, the group I work with is highly discriminated and highly marginalized, highly vulnerable, specifically in access to health care. I don't know whether this story fits into the small cut, and I definitely don't care. My story is that it's work. Because once we realized that LGBT couldn't access services in healthcare, what we decided to do is that, look, we talk, make public
La gente tiene
pronouncements
que
and
hablar, tiene que
talk
hacer
to
pronunciamientos públicos,
ministers,
tiene
and
que
they
hablar
don't
con
care.
ministros y a los ministros no
Really,
les
really
importa.
don't care. It's none of their
De
business.
veras no les
It's
importa,
our
dicen, eso
health
no me,
that's
no me interesa.
at risk at the moment. So what we decided to do is to identify healthcare workers in 6 clinics, facilities, and train them. We spoke to Donna. We are sort of a coalition of organizations. Spoke to Donna to say, help us train these guys. One is very important that they know how to take history, health history of someone who is gay, someone who is lesbian, rather not to homogenize health. So that training happened. Afterwards, the next strategy was that there needs to be accompaniment because LGBT don't go to clinics because they're terrified, they're scared of healthcare workers. So what would happen is that because I'm community healthcare workers, they would accompany members of the LGBT to specific clinics that we had identified, and then they would go to see those nurses who had been trained. After 3 months, the report backs, the monitoring that the nurses did was that we see an increase in LGBT accessing healthcare. We saw less because also the following activities was that the community healthcare workers who are LGBT will go to these facilities and have a stall for hours and hours and talk to patients who come to the clinic, talk to other healthcare workers, talk about lubricants. I mean, 3 years ago, lubricants were not something that's completely foreign in Botswana. Dental dams were completely foreign. So they brought that education within the health system. And did we measure it? We didn't measure it. As to whether there was decreased discrimination. We don't have those resources to do that. But what was important is that more and more LGBT were able to go to those clinics. And the healthcare workers were able to educate other healthcare workers to reduce discrimination. We did this 3 years ago. And right now, when PEPFAR came into Botswana with KP Money and all that halabaloo, those clinics were used as champions of treat all the 6 clinics because of the work that we did. Does this fit into SDG? I don't know. Is it? Does it fit into a scorecard? I don't know. Did it work? Yes, definitely.
In the beginning of CBMP, community-based monitoring, the context was political. In the sense, in 2004, there was a national election, and in that election, the government has talked about the public health system investment, and they have declared that if we elect, then we will introduce a new program or something which would be useful for the people. And the introduction of National Rural Health Mission, that was the context to develop this strategy. Because as you know, in India there is a PHM, People's Health Movements. Jan Swasthya Abhiyan is a strong forum, and it is an active forum at least in India. So after launching National Rural Health Mission, the civil society organization, or group of civil society organizations of the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan has decided how we will engage with the NRH. And I think that was the context, because there are 2 to 3 ways we can engage with the government. You can just protest, come on the road and just protest. That is the one way. Second way, you can engage government and provide services, what government try to provide, and it is not reaching to it is a service-based approach, we can say. And the third one, which has been selected by the civil society organization, to engage critically with the government and try to give an alternative plan for and in that context, there was a space was created of community accountability and public health accountability. And in that context, we have the Jan Swasthya Abhiyan introduced the community-based monitoring, and it has been implemented on pilot basis in 9 states of India, and the Maharashtra was one. So after pilot phase, it is the only Maharashtra state has continued for last 10 to 12 years, the critical engagement with the government.
Okay.
And the reason was, okay, so I will not go in the improvements, or I will not go in the success
Yeah,
stories. I
don't
want
do
to
that.
share with you some reflection. What yesterday Anu was talking about, the vertical integration and horizontal the sandwich strategy. And in that context, when I reflect on the community-based monitoring, we try to develop a mechanism at each level, and that mechanism, for example, we have empowered the village-led sanitation committee at village level. We have taken 3 to 4 active members and developed or constituted a PSC level monitoring committee, PSC primary facilitator monitoring committee, block level, district level, and state level. All these monitoring committees has linkage in between them. So we try to influence at each level, we try to monitor at each level. And unfortunately, we can say that when you reach when you see the impact of your intervention, when you go upwards, the impact decreases. That is our first finding or reflection. Because your hold is at local level, people can understand, people can relate, and people can involve at local level. But at state level, it is very difficult, and there is very limited space for the civil society organizations as well as the community. Second important insight what we have, the plan was the civil society organization will engage in the CBM community-based monitoring process, and the issues, because we will be the part of, we will be inside the system. We will monitor the system from inside, and the issues which are emerged from this monitoring, that can be fed into the movement, into the PHM, into the JSA. So JSA will strengthen themselves by involved in the monitoring of public health system. But unfortunately, in Maharashtra, it has failed, because most of the civil society organizations were the part of Jan Swasthya Abhiyan. They were become implementers, and that is the big lessons we learned. We need to segregate, in the sense there would be linkages between the movement and the project work, but there should be some clear-cut line we have to draw at civil society level. That is, and the last thing is, we are talking about the community, and where is the community, and what is our understanding. The Brendan is talking about you have to reflect and you have to modify your strategy in the morning session. I think we should reflect on who is the community and how we will engage with them in the context that what we understood, what we learned, we understood that community can be engaged on regular basis. Is it not possible? Because in 1,000 village, everywhere or every time, 1,000 people will not come to you, or you will not reach to. So what is, when we will engage community effectively, there are two processes. What we think, getting experiences, taking some experiences, and getting feedback from the community. That would be the effective mechanism to engage with the community at larger level. And second thing, in mass events like Janasumai, public hearing, there the community can be engaged so that they can raise their voices.
For the case of Uganda, in the early 90s, around 1996, first of all, there was very high levels of corruption. For instance, in the health sector, out of every 100 shillings that was sent to the local government levels, around 65% would reach or would be accounted for. The 35% couldn't be accounted for, or actually was lost at different levels. Secondly, there was limited participation of citizens in different government programs. Actually, I would say there was almost no participation. And the other thing is that there was very limited knowledge about government programs and also about the rights of citizens, including government officials. If someone walked in a public office and asked how much money was sent to a health center, you would be arrested by then. It was really very difficult. So we came in and said, let's empower citizens. Even government officials did not know that the budget was a public document, that one would ask for it. So that is when we came in with our community-based monitoring approach to empower citizens. And of course, it really worked for us. I remember in the beginning it was very hard. Our staff were arrested when we went to one of our districts to ask for a budget of a district called Boshenyi. Staff were arrested. And they were asked, who are you to ask for our money? They were calling it their money. And of course, since we were armed with the laws, we actually cited the Constitution, but none of the government officials even knew what rights we had to ask for this document. And lucky enough, we actually had contacts of some of the security people at national level who helped us remove our staff after being detained for 3 days. Of course, to date, citizens are now fully aware about their rights. Then they have been able to put pressure on government officials to be able to become more accountable. And we have also seen a number of instances in public meetings where government officials have publicly confessed after citizens have confronted them and returned some items publicly. Actually, we have witnessed, we've even witnessed some of the items that had disappeared being returned. So in other words, and the other thing is that people now put a lot of trust in community-based monitors. Each time there's an election and a community monitor stands, they stand higher chances of being elected because they know they can entrust them with their money. People are using it as a platform now to rise. Then, what are some of the challenges? First of all, the fact that this approach is purely voluntary, we don't pay anyone. It's really a challenge, sustaining the issue of voluntarism. People still don't understand that what they are monitoring is actually helping them. They think that they have to be paid to even monitor a service that is right next to them. Then the issue of poverty, since poverty levels are still high in Uganda in rural communities, it's still actually, some of the monitors actually are subject to corruption. Some of them have been abused, and some of them have been bribed and have ended up taking bribes. Then accepting bribes in return to actually not displaying the information. And the last point about the laws, government actually has realized that citizens have become more empowered. And of course, right now, they have started enacting very harsh laws to curb public participation. For instance, we have the Public Order Management Act, which requires every citizen, if you're meeting more than 5, to ask for permission from police before you can meet. Even when we have trainings, we've seen security officials sneak in like participants to listen to what we are discussing, which we think is not okay. So those are some of the challenges we are facing in Uganda.
In most of our settings, particularly in Africa and Uganda in particular, we have quality policies. We have quality, documents that are put up from national level, but these remain at national level. They don't trickle down. Just like we were discussing yesterday, a policy is passed at that high level, but then we don't find a common person get to look at it. And then the community was always left out, not aware of what they're entitled to, and they just left in that state that they don't understand what is transpiring within their context. So they're always at the receiving end. So as an organization, World Vision, this is an approach we are doing across quite a number of countries, around 47 countries. So the magic bullet was, if you empower the community, let them understand what they are supposed to get, then there will be something we could turn around, because we would do a lot of advocacy at national level, but we realize the issues we are trying to advocate for affect the local person on ground. So hoping this local person understand what they're entitled to, try to unpack what is always passed as a policy for them to appreciate and be part of the process was really a breakthrough. So in most of our settings, after we've engaged and empowered the community members, we move on to, they get to appreciate and know that what they are entitled to has always been hidden away from them, because they actually knew nothing about what is supposed to happen. So the citizens' voice and action, after empowering them and then knowing what they're entitled to, then they begin voicing up their issues. So we'll look at them in different sects or different forums, where later on these teams come together and form more of a coalition at a district level. So if they've had issues come from the sub-counties, we'd see them move over later to form a district level team that now goes on to engage the district leadership. To a point that we have them write position papers that are discussed in district councils. And we've seen this influence a number of policies in Uganda particularly. We've had ordinances assented to and have had child protection policies passed to protect children against child marriage, service delivery and all that. Now, whereas this does work at ground or community level, it has a direct link to the advocacy we do at national level. So we have a process under which issues that have always come from the community come to the district, and if they can't be handled there, they're pushed to the national level. So we've had a number of political and policymakers buy into this approach and then really help us push some of these things beyond the community level. And as of such, like I mentioned, we've had of recent a document was written by the permanent secretary to the health department, because the issue was you build the capacity, you try to convince the district to hire health workers, but then they are taken away without any justifiable reason. So the permanent secretary wrote and said, if you have to take away any staff, her office must be informed. But also, all the IPs and the communities that have participated in this process must be consulted first. So that gives some bit of relief and provides quality services to the community members. We're not taking this on. We've had communities move on to challenge and engage duty bearers without fear, because they're empowered with the messages and information. And the duty bearers get to appreciate that these people are informed because they have the information, they have the evidence, and they're using the documents designed by them to hold them accountable. Recently, we had issues relating to space for MCH services. So it was a limited space, a facility that had service uptake increased from an average of 30 deliveries a year to 150 rather per month. So the space was too limited, but what government was telling them, look here, you need to procure land. Without land, we can't help with space improvement. So because the communities were empowered and they knew how exactly to go about that, they did a fundraising, procured land within 2 months, and they were on the door of government engaging. We need the facility. You wanted us to buy land? Here is the land. So government had no choice but to relocate resources to that sector, and they put up a new structure for them. So the communities see this as a much more engaging and informative way of engaging government. And we've seen them, of course, initially there are those fears. How do I talk to the leaders? They are the final, decision makers. But then there is kind of a shift in how business is being done. So government appreciates that communities have a role to play. They also appreciate that the power belongs to the people, not necessarily them. We've seen this really do magic in our areas.
In the Guatemalan context, to start with, budget-wise, only about 1% of the national budget is really allocated to health. Additionally, we're talking about a historical context where, since the inception of the country itself, racism has played a key role towards discriminating and marginalizing indigenous people. Where does that put us today? Well, today we see that for the government of Guatemala, for the Guatemalan state, health is a business, and what they're trying to do is to privatize health. And so we work in 5 regions, 5 out of 22 regions in the country, in areas that are densely populated. Oh, sorry. I turned it off. That are densely populated by indigenous people that more or less all face similar context regarding what I just said before about the historical exclusion. The legal framework of the country theoretically allows for the participation of all the population. However, this is not accomplished because the historical and structural context does not allow the indigenous people to participate, and they make up roughly about 50% of the country. In more or less the decade that we have been working with these communities, we have come to realize that the key to our work is really participation. And the key to this approach is really working together with community leaders, because because it is community leaders that open the door for us, that open the door to this participation so that communities feel comfortable in speaking out and saying how they've been abused or discriminated against. So this is the base from where we start to work. So we're trying to ensure participation so that we can engage with health authorities so that they can,
En los servicios de salud.
so that they can engage and improve health services. Although we haven't achieved our overall goal that this happens all the time, communities are able to go into spaces where they can engage with policymakers, with decision makers, with health authorities to talk about, discuss, and deal with the problems that are present